Why, hello there. It's me, Jeremy, your favorite bald dude telling you about Standard and Strange, a store and a brand with simple rules. Sell clothes they themselves would wear, manufacture it ethically, and build it to last. From boots made in Oregon to loop wheel garments made in Japan, find all the best clothes for your wardrobe at Standard and Strange. StandardandStrange.com. Hello. Hey folks, it's Jeremy. You're listening to Blammo. By the way, do you remember when your friend's dad would answer that way because he thought he was really cool? People would answer the phone, they'd say yellow, and they'd think it's really funny. That's like me. That's like me, just sitting here in my basement talking to a wall. This is going to be a wordy, deep thought podcast, by the way. I always re-listen to the episodes before they go live to, just double check for my idiocy and things like that, fact checking and stuff. But I was re-listening to this episode and processing things further. And, I kind of had a bit of a pause here and there because I think, clothing, it's such an incredible medium for self-discovery. No does is the podcast, right? But I buy clothes to tell the world what I like, how I want to express myself, and also how I want to affiliate myself. But, none of these things actually have meaning. We give them the meaning. And that specific thing was something heavily discussed on this week's pod. A brand that has sought out to lead with this mentality is Goodfight. And I'm joined by one of their co-founders, Caleb Lin. We go all over the place on this episode. And we get into his journey with the industry, but something this episode spent a lot of time on was the hard stuff. I think most folks that come on, they tend to kind of lean into all their success, and it felt like we hovered a lot more on the grind. And I like that. I like that a lot because obviously we know he's successful. Goodfight is an incredible brand and everybody loves it. And it's if you know, and they're crushing it. But the fact of just building a brand, I think people really forget about how incredibly difficult it is. So, we talked with Caleb Lin, one of the founders and brand directors of Goodfight, and we talk about, how he got to where he was through his very non-traditional background, his family's wild career paths, being a personal assistant with Will Smith's creative team, not taking no for an answer, working at opening ceremony. But we get into the philosophical on the meaning of success and how it can be defined, and even more philosophical with a rabbit hole down the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Yep. I promise it all makes sense. It's a heavy one. Let's dive in.
Finding people in fashion that are actually interested in sports is so far and in between. And it makes me feel like it's like a dirty, to me, sometimes it feels like a dirty secret where I don't know, I think I grew up playing every sport and my dad, he's a native New Yorker. He's been a Yankees fan, a Knicks fan, Georgia Pearl, everybody, long time. So sports kind of is in my DNA, and finding other people within the industry that care about that. I feel like sometimes it grounds me, in a sense of kind of pulling you out of the cultural zeitgeist of everything that is fashion, everything that surrounds it too, the music and the art and the pop culture and the things that inevitably get kind of sucked into its orbit. I feel like sports, in some ways sometimes becomes the great equalizer, or, whatever you're interested in, the person that's sitting in the stands, the person that's sitting at home watching on TV, everybody cares a little bit different, So I think just seeing, I've been watching JJ and it's been so amazing seeing guys like him, all the smoke guys, the knuckleheads guys, all these guys who are players who have so much to say, have this opportunity, have this platform now to be able to speak, to be able to give input that sometimes jives with and sometimes contrasts with the sports analysts, and nothing to take away from the sports analysts, because I think those guys have their place too, and I think JJ would say that as well. But seeing the way
he's becoming an analyst now,
look at him on ESPN, he's taking over ESPN now too. He's on First Take and Get Up and everything all the time. So yeah, but it was just so cool because I was just watching one of the episodes of him breaking down one of the games, and I'm like, is that a Blammo sticker on his laptop? That's fucking amazing. Just the convergence of worlds was so rad. So that's great. That's a little thing that
Well, Caleb, Huge pleasure to meet you. I've loved what you guys have been doing for a while, and I definitely want to chat through a ton of the brand, but more importantly, you. I mean, I think we've like you were talking about with sports and fashion. I think for me, this show has always been more about the people and like making connections with those people because clothes are great, but I think there's so much stigma attached to things, whether you're some like person who only wears old clothes and is using that as like their high road to just like buy more stuff that's vintage, or or people that are all in the like sustainability mindset or any of these things. Right. But it's just like being able to kind of communicate more like who these people are, who these designers are, and also the fact that like there's other things that we're doing other than talking about clothes all day. Right. I mean, obviously clothes are a visual medium and this is audio, but like you're on your phone, you can Google this stuff pretty quick. Like it's pretty fast to just find it. But anyway, I mean, I'm really, really glad that you're on. So this is great.
Yeah. Thank you for reaching out. And obviously like Andrew, shout out Andrew.
Andrew Chen. You know who you are.
Yeah.
316.
From 316. Yeah, that's family. So
yeah. Well, so you kind of come from like a traditional like retail but like top tier retail background, right? I mean, you were at opening ceremony and all that. I mean, what was kind of like your journey pre Goodfight?
Let's see. I kind of feel like I always tell people whenever we talk about Goodfight, I feel like Goodfight's kind of like a living document. The first thing is that we have, like I mentioned before, we have 4 members. I'm actually, I'll start off from the top by saying like, I'm not the designer. A lot of people, usually ask me if I'm the designer. I'm not the designer. I'm probably, you'll see me a little bit more sometimes because I think I talk more and I'm more of the kind of get shit done guy. But our designer, Calvin Nguyen, him and Julia, our creative director, Julia Chu, they're kind of like the creative force behind like a lot of the clothes, the artwork, all those different kinds of things. And then we have our kind of business strategy partner, who's Christina Chow, who happens to be my wife too. And then I run kind of like, I kind of act as a brand director. I kind of have my hands in a little bit of everything, especially with my background as a buying director after opening ceremony. So, but the brand itself is kind of like an amalgamation of the 4 of us. I think that's what makes it a little bit more unique, a little bit more complicated, I think sometimes for whether that's people writing about it or people or buyers trying to kind of like wrap their head around it. I think that's what makes it a little bit unique. I think for me, as an individual, I've always kind of found myself in a journey of, and I think we all are in a certain extent, I've always found myself in a journey of trying to find myself. I think
welcome to the show.
Yeah. I think all of us have that. I was listening to Mobilagi's interview the other day, and he has such a fascinating background. And for me, I think I found a little bit of like I empathize with I think some of the experiences that he went through. Our path was a little bit different, but in the sense of also like me, I'm born and raised in New York City, but my parents are Taiwanese. But I think also I have maybe kind of a more non-traditional immigrant story in a sense too, in that like my parents are 100% immigrants, but they also came very, very early on. And so I think even my experience specifically as a quote unquote Asian American or a Taiwanese American is a little bit unique in the sense of like my dad moved to New York when he was 17 years old to go to college. He went to Columbia and he got into the PhD program for English literature. And when he was a kid, he had aspirations to move to New York because he used to watch mob movies. And that was he always wanted to move to New York. My uncles used to tell me about how, and maybe this is where I get a little bit of the fashion background too, is my uncles used to always tell me how my dad would cut school and wear pinstripe suits, dress up in pinstripe suits and sneak out to the movie theater. And that was his kind of like education as a kid, because they had like a kind of unique family. I think he ended up getting sent off to boarding school, and he always felt a little bit like a misfit, and he felt like he didn't belong, and he wanted to go to New York. So he went to New York. All of my uncles did kind of interesting things. My oldest uncle ended up moving out to California super, super early on before, like, down to Laguna Niguel, before Laguna Niguel was Laguna Niguel, when it was still all farmland. And he was farming there. And my youngest uncle, so my dad's big sister, she moved to Wisconsin. I don't know how you get from Taiwan to Wisconsin. That's like a whole nother thing. And then my youngest uncle ended up in Maryland and became a doctor. He was actually one of the presidential doctors for Jimmy Carter and Ronald Reagan.
Good God. Yeah, so the bar's pretty low for you. So, what you want to do.
They're all over the place. And if you want to talk about like the American experience, like I think my family on my father's side had a little bit of a more non-traditional, but also like literally like moving into like the Midwest and literally becoming farmers. Like my oldest uncle, like I said, he became a farmer. And then the uncle who was a presidential doctor actually he farms on the weekends. And his my cousin,
one does.
It's like, yeah, of course, right? He has this like 7-acre farm in Virginia that he goes to kind of like, detox. And my cousin who became a doctor as well ended up. This is really interesting. So both of them have this kind of philosophy, and my grandfather was a doctor too. He believed this too. But they have this philosophy that medicine doesn't heal people; the body heals people. What medicine does is to flip the right switches within the body that triggers the body to heal itself. So it's kind of like a little bit more, it's not Eastern medicine, it's still Western medicine, but a little bit more of a holistic viewpoint. And so my cousin at some point got so fed up as a doctor that he realized that he felt like he could do more good and help more people by starting a beer company, by bringing happiness to people through beer. So he has a beer company, and my uncle turned that farm that he has into like their first their first mill for the beer company. And it's
what's the beer?
It's called Elder Pine.
Elder Pine.
Yeah, okay. Elder Pine. It's really good. I think
my knowledge of beer and alcohol in general is slim to nil. So I apologize if you don't see a reaction.
No worries. But yeah, so my dad moved to New York when he was 17. My mom moved to Queens when she was 11. She had a little bit more of, I guess, the traditional story from the Taiwanese perspective in terms of like moving. And I say it specifically, it's so hard. I recently read this book, The Loneliest Americans by J. Caspian Kang, and from the New York Times. Okay. And he talks about this idea that the Asian American experience, and it's so nuanced too, and there's so many different kinds of people. You can't to kind of paint the experience with one brush is way too broad. So, but specifically for my mom, she moved to Queens when she was 11. She grew up around Elmhurst, and she grew up in New York, like a New Yorker. So I feel like I was very blessed in the sense that they both obviously still had a lot of their Eastern culture with them, but at the same time, they became fully Americanized as well. And so I feel very blessed in the sense that I feel like I got the best of both worlds. There's not like one I like more than the other. People ask me all the time, I live in LA now. Okay, like, what do you prefer? Do you prefer Los Angeles or New York? And I'm just like, look, like you can't really compare the two. Like both of them are so special in their own ways. Both of them will never be the other. Like I think anytime each city tries to become the other, they fail horribly. Right? If LA ever tries to reproduce what's going on in New York, it just doesn't work here, And in the same vein, the special thing about California is the fact, so many different things in terms of like even culture and the way that it's preserved here. Ironically, like I think you've been in New York for a long time now. People.
But I left. I'm gone.
Oh, where are you right now?
Now I'm in St. Louis, Missouri.
Oh, no way. My wife's from Chicago.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I used to go to Chicago a bunch, but we moved in October of 2020. Yeah. To St. Louis more because of...
You're there for family.
Yeah, I'm there for family.
Hopefully as a St. Louis boy, you're proud of Jason Tatum. Game 7, Jason Tatum pulling through right now.
That's
Shout
true.
out St. Louis. I love the Midwest, by the way. My wife is the only reason I think why I've kind of gone out there a little bit. And pre-pandemic, I was really hoping to actually travel through the U.S. When I was a kid, so my dad took over my grandfather's. He had an accessories business, and he would sell accessories to different department stores, JCPenney's, Macy's, places like that, Army, Navy.
Yeah.
So he traveled all through the US. And every now and then I get to tag along with him on these trips where he would go show. At the time, it's actually pretty funny because at the time I didn't understand he was going to show merchandise to buyers. And it was something that I fell into later that, kind of looking back on that, it was weird. My parents will lament, I think sometimes, obviously you understand, like I think most parents, I don't think it's even specific necessarily sometimes to culture. They always hope that their kids become, some kind of success, a doctor, a lawyer, or whatever, something that's stable, something that's successful.
Yeah, well, it's funny because you ended on successful, and it's like, what is like the idea of what success is now is very different. Like success back then, if you're like baby boomer post World War II, success just means security.
Right.
It means health and security.
Right.
And it's like if you can get that through working at a coffee shop, is that successful? Is that I mean, because I think externally some people would be like, oh, that person's just grinding it out, like they don't, but the one thing that I have seen more than ever from, this is not any sort of flex, but like celebrity friends or people that are just absurdly wealthy, all of these things where it's like they might be externally viewed as someone who's successful or someone who made it, but they don't feel that way. I don't know if anyone truly feels successful, because if that's equaling happiness, I don't know if it's the capitalistic mindset or materialistic culture that we're in, or the fact that Instagram reminds you never have what someone else does. Like, I think it's a very tough rabbit to chase.
It is. And you know what? I would say that I don't even know that it's necessarily specific to capitalist or Western cultures either.
No,
I think
that's true.
Yeah. And in a way, because I do think that like a lot of people point to that. And obviously there's obvious pitfalls to kind of like the kind of system of materialism that I think a lot of people become more aware of. But it's a struggle that everybody has. I feel like even, as much as like you have this kind of like new generation that's kind of returning to like soulcraft, right? That's kind of, I would say that's even maybe more our generation than the younger generation, right? Of this idea of kind of like you were talking about, like I know a bunch of guys actually even here in LA that were lawyers and stuff like that before and literally quit and opened their own coffee shops. But this idea that, the thing is like even people that are farmers still struggle with the same, I think, insecurities and questions and desire to find happiness that all the rest of us do. It's like the guy that's in the penthouse in New York City and the guy that's on like a plot of land in Missouri. Sometimes like people don't realize that some of the things that they want is actually pretty similar, even if the way that they try to hunt it out is different. Yeah.
I mean, I think we all want to be loved and heard. Like you want someone to be proud of you. You want what you contribute to be valuable, and you want to be cared for. Like that is a inherent natural desire amongst every culture, background, individual. It's I don't know where that's from. I mean, we can connect the dots all day, but that is just the thing that like unites all of us.
It is,
in the sense that just this pursuit of acceptance.
Yeah. So for me, I think it's like I think my parents sometimes lament the fact that I ended up back in fashion and retail in kind of a thing that I think they kind of felt like they were able to kind of escape.
Versus being like Biden's doctor right now or something?
Versus doing something else, which is ironic though, because at the same time, so like, okay, so I went to college at UCLA. My family moved us out to California because my parents wanted to get me into the UC system. And get that in-state tuition, which is very different than it is now. The tuition right now is almost like a private college.
Really?
Yeah, it's wild how much it costs now. My brother's going to UCI right now, and it's fucking wild. But when I came to California, I loved it, and I wanted to stay here, so I went to UCLA and I studied.
How old were you when you came?
16.
Okay.
Yeah, it was cool. I think for me, obviously, like a lot of what I missed was like my friends that I was leaving, but you get kind of like a little bit of that new kid shine too at school, which was kind of interesting.
Plus, you got the cool guy. I'm from New York points. That's
a little bit of that. Yeah, I wasn't that cool, I think. I was like, I think that I was just trying to find myself.
Sure.
I met a lot of girls. I think that that were kind of I existed to, which was a little bit different for me, I think, growing up on the East Coast. And that made me want to stay a little bit too. I got to be careful because my wife's going to listen to this at some point and I'm going to be in bad territory.
Well, I mean, obviously, I'm married too, but it's like, you dated other people before. Yeah.
And also
Thank
like,
God,
and that's,
right?
that's what you think about when you're at that age. That's all you think about.
Of course.
Right? Even like the clothes we wear, the music we listen to, the way that we want to be perceived, all of it's kind of like attached to attracting somebody, so I came out and I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I think I realized, I think late into my college career that I wanted to do something a little bit more creative. I had tried my hand at some of the more traditional paths that my parents kind of had pushed me towards. They were both engineers. I definitely was not kind of a math and science person. That was never my strong suit.
Right.
I tried econ and that killed me and I did terribly in it. Which is ironic
What's
again
econ?
Because I did
like economics.
Yeah, a biz econ.
Okay,
which is kind of like the undergrad major at UCLA. So when I came out, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I just wanted to do, like how many times you talk to young kids? What do you want to do? I want to be creative. That's pretty much like all right? I did. I was just interested in music. I think you have a little bit of a background or a much more heavy background in music than I do, I think.
Yeah, I moved to New York to be a musician.
Yeah, which is,
as you can see, I've been crushing it for the past few years.
Which is cool because it all kind of pushes you towards something. So, same thing for me. I think I was very interested in music and stuff like that. I didn't know what I wanted to do. My best friend was going to SC and his roommate was this guy, Johan Lam. Who had this little band called 316 at the time. They were printing the
Cousins shirt.
Was no, it was pre-Cousins. This was This was like Martin Luther King T-shirts and
nice.
stuff like that. Yeah. So very early on, he was like, "Hey, one of my friends has a fashion brand. Him and his partner Andrew. I can talk to him to see if he has anything going on." So I met up with Johan. He ended up getting me a job at this tiny streetwear boutique called El Mercado on Pico and Hauser in Los Angeles. And then I interned and I worked at the same time for 316. So El Mercado kind of paid the bills, helping to run that tiny little shop there. And then I just was an intern for 316, and that's kind of like my start, I think, getting into fashion. I think before that I'd worked at like Urban Outfitters in college for a little bit.
Hey, I worked at Banana Republic and Hollister.
Solid.
Ain't nothing wrong with that.
No, it teaches you the foundations. You know what I mean? I think especially for me, just like really basic things of like structure and stuff like that. So
nice.
But yeah, that's how I first got in.
And then you were at opening ceremony. Then you were at American Rag.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and those are like, obviously opening ceremony is not what it was anymore. I think it's totally gone now, right?
Well,
the brand still exists,
brand
but
exists.
The store isn't.
Yeah, the stores are gone, and we'll see. Actually, I do think that they'll be back at some point, but the whole plan, I think this is maybe a little bit of a tangent, but I think like the whole plan for them, I think, was to shut down the third-party retail aspect of what they were doing and open kind of more private label stores anyways. So I think at some point you might see them back again. And
Humberto's been doing all sorts of stuff. Directing music videos. Doing all sorts of stuff.
Yeah.
The Linda Winda's video he did of like the best new punk band of all time right now.
His mom's restaurant. I actually, funny story was they actually had me help his mom write a book about her background. I think that Spike Jonze had always wanted to kind of take her life story. She has a crazy story, and to kind of turn it into a film. And so I actually like sat and helped her kind of like put some of it down on paper. I don't think it was good enough because this film never got made. So it's floating out there somewhere. We'll see if anything ever comes of it. But I think even my I think, man, my time at 316 was so special. I think seeing Andrew and Johan, obviously those guys they're so solid. I think seeing the way that they I think especially during a time when they first started out as a streetwear brand and the way that they were able to transition into Americana and denim and everything like that and become just kind of like such this, for me, even still, I think obviously like our brands kind of sit in slightly different spaces, but I still look up to them so much. And I always talk about how like I literally wouldn't be here without the two of them. They taught me in the way that they move, in the way that they treat people. Specifically even in the way that they treat their people and their staff and their team. That's something that is so much more amazing to me than like a runway show or winning an award or something like that. It's like if you can do that, like then you've made it. Kind of going back to what you were talking about in terms of like what is accomplishment, what's the things that like we really care about.
Well, you look at all the like, and I'm not making a direct comparison here, but the brands that people truly, truly love and admire that would be considered like a heritage brand, whether like Louis Vuitton or Hermes or Ralph Lauren or any of these things, those were companies that like have always put their people first in the sense that they're like people wanted to be there.
Right.
Like people, and you got a lot out of it. Like I don't know a single person who worked for Ralph Lauren, like corporate wise, who regretted the time they spent there. All of them talk about like it was like a PhD in some other, in design or whatever language. And then when you look at people that have worked at, Hermes and like some LVMH brands, like now some of this is cultural in the sense that like they live in a country where their government has like healthcare and stuff like that, where it's a little bit easier. But there's such an emphasis on family and long term. And when I mean family, I mean like the company family. And so like you're just invested in so much. And when you look at brands that are started here that maybe backed by a VC that has to have a really, really accelerated, crazy growth, people are just batteries.
Yeah.
And when they're empty, they're just discarded. And it's like, it's tough to build something that has so much staying power when the external conversations that are occurring are people who are just burnt out.
Yeah.
I mean, when people speak about how much they valued a time at a certain place, that gives so much brand affinity to that brand far more than any advertising budget ever could.
Absolutely. I mean, and I feel especially right now, it's like, if you look at our consumer, like obviously there's so much that's out there right now and there's so much that's accessible, things that were not accessible before. Even, and it's wild to think how much of that has even changed in the past decade. At the end of the day, even though obviously there's plenty of bullshit out there, customers are looking for authenticity. And I think that they can, I think there's a lot that they can see past. Obviously there's sometimes you kind of shake your head at what they don't. But at the same time, I think that customers now are a lot more hungry for that sense of authenticity.
I think there's that. And I mean, that kind of brings me to Goodfight too, where it's like traditionally, and I mean, maybe the past 30 years ago, you could be a clothing brand and all you needed to do was make clothes. You made the clothes and you sold the clothes. And I think now the weight of being a clothing brand doesn't exist. You have to be a brand.
Yeah.
And that's great because it allows you to create things in any medium you want. Maybe you're just doing clothes now. Maybe you move to film direction and films or whatever that sort of thing is. And I think that's great, but it also means you kind of have to have a say in all these things. Right. And now, at least for me, as a like a client, consumer, whatever you want to call it, like I want the brand that I wear to say all of these things that I am maybe too embarrassed or too ashamed to have a public conversation on. Where it's like, I want the fact that I wear this brand for you to know how I feel about all these other things. And that is more and more of a desire, especially with newer and younger consumers, where they want who they patronize to do some of the work for them or to educate them in, some sort of aspirational, whether it's being more active in their government or, being more active in mental health or those things. Right. So like, I am curious because I think like Goodfight is not a brand that just makes clothes. I mean, you guys have cool stuff.
Yeah, thank you.
But there's a little bit more to it,
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah. We started the brand, man. So my last day at American Rag was the day of the 2016 election.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's a good
Which
time.
was a great time to start. Which was a really interesting time to start. I remember my mom
Uh-huh.
messaging me and being like, "Hey, I don't know if this is a good time to start a new business." And I was like,
I got this, Mom.
and I remember, I think at that time, what kind of like brought it about was, at that point, I'd kind of been in the industry for like over a decade. Like you said, like I had the opportunity to work for like a lot of amazing institutions. And I felt like, I think specifically for me, one of the things that really got me was I wanted to continue to create more space for different people and different ideas. I think one of the core ideas of Goodfight is it's not that we have all the answers, but I think we would like to hope that when you encounter our brand, that you ask the question, why? And that's kind of like at the core of everything that we do. Our creative director, Julia, she always talks about how like at our core, you always have people trying to understand and trying to put you in a box. It's not always because it's not malicious necessarily, even. I think sometimes it's just people trying to understand. But at the core of our brand, it's about curiosity. And it's about kind of questioning the status quo and everything that was going on in the US, for all the American listeners or even people that were like looking from the outside, it felt kind of like what was going on politically was kind of an avatar of what was kind of going on within culture. And that was this idea that it doesn't matter how you win as long as you win. And that was something I think that felt especially prevalent. I'm sure it's prevalent in music, it's prevalent in media, it's prevalent in fashion. I think that's the thing that we struggle with all the time, that the hypocrisy of our industry, right? And this idea that you can have this t-shirt of this kind of like big lofty ideal, but then don't pay your vendors on time or go and treat your employees like shit. And different things like that. And I think
Sorry.
And yeah, I mean, like we all kind of know the behind the scenes stories of so many different kinds of things and organizations and things like that. And for me, like I had always known that I wanted to do something for myself, with people that I love. And we started Goodfight because we hoped that the brand could show people that you could operate at a high level through integrity, through kindness, through doing small things, the minefield of the subject that is sustainability, of whether that will ever be accomplished by anybody or anything. And I don't know if maybe this is like, I shouldn't touch this. This is like very, very controversial.
No, you're good.
But I mean, like, it's like to be a sustainable brand, it's like, okay, like that's good. And that's important, obviously. And anything that adds to that is good. But how can you be for sustainability and then not pay your worker a minimum wage? Or be nickel and diming a factory? And, like we have customers or there's people that ask all the time, why is this so expensive? Or why does this XYZ? And it's like, well, think about if you're buying this like $20 t-shirt from this XYZ retailer, how much do you think that they paid the person that actually put that thing together? Because they don't have machines to do it yet. The machines can do a lot now, but there's still a lot. Somebody has to run it through, and that was the big thing. I think that kind of opposite side. We're not a brand that's about social justice or anything like that. But at the same time, I think as human beings, we have the things that we believe in. And so whether that's one from perspective in terms of being exploratory from an artistic sense, we always say that we believe in art and the power of human value at our core at Goodfight. And we believe that those two things don't have to be mutually exclusive. In fact, they should be very, very tied in with each other. Because just like you were talking about before, people are probably going to do their best work when they feel good, when things are going well, when they feel like, okay, if I put in this much, I'm also getting back this much too, So that's why we started the brand. We felt like, I remember at one point when I was buying at American Rag, we did this pop-up, this China pop-up. And they sent me over to Beijing and Hong Kong and Shanghai to go find new emerging designers from China. And I think there was a lot of really awesome relationships I got from it. There was a lot of really crazy talent, a lot of really cool things that I think a lot of people don't even realize are going on over there creatively. But one of the things that I think kind of shook me up a little bit was, I would say like 90% of the brands that I ended up meeting up with, a lot of them, they were Central St. Martin's kids, or they were connected to the factory that mix Balenciaga or XYZ. And a lot of the designs that I saw looked like European designs. Like you wouldn't know that it was something that's different. There was no necessarily evidence of it being Chinese. And at the same time, for it to be Chinese, this is also like really shitty too, is so many times when you transport different kinds of Eastern brands into or culture, movies, things, themes that get moved into the Western sense, then it's obviously a lot of times slapped with throw a fucking dragon on it or make it red or it's all about family. Everything's about family honor. And it's just like, no, dude, like we think about so many other things beyond that. But the thing for me was that there was no in between of the whole purpose of me going there was let me find the young, talented designers that are doing something different, that are doing something exciting, that are doing something groundbreaking. And of course there's nothing new under the sun. We're all shaped a certain kind of way. It's going to have references and that's totally fine. But what's the remix? What's the fresh thing? And I think as a buyer, that's what I was always hunting for. Like when you see guys like Kiko, when you see guys like Craig, when you see guys like Grace, Wales Bonner and Nicholas Daly and, all these different designers that are doing something that kind of takes you somewhere else, that takes fashion that you thought you understood. And you're like, holy shit, I never thought that you could do that before. I felt like I was seeing so much of like, they were trying to hit the notes that would allow them to be accepted on the international stage. And that was really sad to me. So one of the reasons why I wanted to do Goodfight was, I said to my wife, like, I want to create a spaceship. I don't know if you've seen the show Firefly.
Yeah.
So
you're on a podcast.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite. Yeah, I should realize that. So, but and I mean, R.I.P. Joss Whedon and all the other things attached to him in terms of all that.
Oh
stuff.
Jesus, yeah,
yeah. But maybe I shouldn't even bring that up. But Firefly.
No,
the reason the show is so exciting is because, well, one, it's kind of like a space western, right? Everybody loves that, Cowboy Bebop. Whatever. But there's also this idea of like, it's literally, it's just a bunch of friends that are on a vehicle that takes them different places to have adventures together. And that's what I wanted to do with a few of my friends. And we hope to do like a little bit of good along the way. And one of the things that we hope to do was we wanted to kind of create, in fact, we didn't even know that we were going to do clothes when we first started. But being that like 3 out of the 4 of us, our main expertise was in clothes, I met our 2 other partners, Calvin and Julia, at opening ceremony at this point, almost over 13 or 14 years ago, working on the floor at OC. We wanted to try to bring something different. We wanted to bring something that could hopefully fill in that space in between, that hopefully gave the opportunity to create that kind of expression and create something new. We wanted to do it in a way, hopefully, that wasn't we didn't want to kind of necessarily take you to outer space. Not, again, that there's anything wrong with that, but we've always said that, like, we hope that Goodfight can kind of be a bridge so that anybody kind of whatever walk of life they come from, they can come and kind of have some kind of touch point of like, oh, that's kind of familiar. So let me take a look at this again. But then that there might be some kind of aspect within it that can take them somewhere new.
Yeah. I mean, because a lot of the stuff, you're kind of speaking a Harvard Business Review of identity and design in like the 21st century. Because I feel like, and this is the thing too, where I was talking about where like a brand can exist and make cool clothes, but now, and what I think Goodfight does, and obviously like the stuff you're talking about is more about ushering in the... This episode is brought to you by Standard & Strange. Where are the summer fits at? Is it too hot? Look, I've always been one of those less is more folks, and I just tend to wear a bright color. Hello, yellow. But lately, I've been feeling the Joe McCoy pocket tees from Standard & Strange. They have a cherry red and a forest green, and wow, they are so good. Because it's hard to get pocket tees right. But these are 100% cotton, garment dyed, which means they're dyed after they're actually made, and they're made in Japan. Oh, and did I mention they're only available at Standard & Strange? Look, if you're still thinking, just head over to standardandstrange.com and see why they're one of my favorite shops. Their selection of denim, boots, sportswear is incredible. And geez, what other retail store donates 2% of their revenue, not profits, to giving back? I love these folks, so should you. Visit standardandstrange.com to learn more. And be sure to sign up for their mailing list so you never miss the latest dope gear they have at standardandstrange.com. Over the years, I've had the joy of trying tons of brands. Some good, some bad, always trying to figure out what works for me. But a brand I've loved and continue to love is Proper Cloth. Founded in 2008, Proper Cloth has revolutionized the custom clothing experience, and it's been where I get my button-downs and dress shirts from, and I haven't looked back. They just get better. From incredible Italian fabrics to that perfect collar, Proper Cloth has made a seamless process to either measure your favorite shirt yourself or just visit one of their showrooms in New York City. And if you're looking for something more casual, Proper Cloth will let you custom order a polo shirt with incredible fabrics from some of the best mills in Italy. Take my advice and get a long sleeve polo. Wear that under a Proper Cloth shirt jacket and you got a stew going, my friend. Fun tip, what shirts do you need in your wardrobe? Blue and white Oxfords, folks, and a Bengal stripe. Let's go. Those are the three. Get them now at propercloth.com. So go custom like your boy or ready to wear. Visit propercloth.com to learn more. That's propercloth.com. Entire medium of fashion and language of fashion than a specific piece. And this is great because you didn't mention, oh man, when we made the mesh short, when we did that mesh short with the military pocket, that was, we make, it's like, no. Like this is, you haven't mentioned a single product. It's how you think about clothes and what you want this industry to evolve to is what I think is the most, refreshing of all of this.
I think our core belief is that our understanding of perfection is imperfection. I went to this lecture one time from this amazing motion graphics guy who I think studied under Saul Bass. And I remember him saying that all art, and I'm spacing on his name because he's it's Kyle something.
Kyle Cooper?
Kyle Cooper. He's also like a legendary motion graphics guy. He did the title sequence for like Seven and some of like the most iconic.
I Googled that. That's how I
Yeah, there you go.
Just, that's I'm not smart.
Check him out though. And he's awesome. Okay. And he talked about how all art imitates life. And that actually the more perfect something is, the more unnatural it is. Right. But that as motion graphics, as CGI, as different kinds of things have gotten better, it's gotten better at mimicking imperfection. And I think for us, like that's kind of like part of our brand ethos too, is that like we believe in this idea that like sometimes I think also like even within fashion as kind of like kids, like we're all kind of like you mentioned before, like we're all shop kids. I think kids that kind of came in, maybe it's a traditional route in some sense, but also like a non-traditional route of like, we're not, our designer actually, he did go to fashion school to be trained in design, but at the same time, like we don't come from Parsons or like a traditional school or anything like that. We haven't done all the shows and things like that. And yet we're able to kind of like sit in the places that we sit at, and by being ourselves. And I think like that's having the opportunity to do that has also been the blessing of getting that cosign from other players and stuff like that within our industry. But at the end of the day, like the brand it's like you said, we've never been a brand that's been about like product, because our product's always going to change. Like if you'll notice, like our seasons change very drastically from season to season. We've only started actually having a little bit more of a through line in terms of like kind of core product. But at the end of the day, like our brand's about people. Like all the things that we have, the t-shirt that you're wearing, the books that you have on your shelf, the thing that you keep in your closet that like you've had everywhere that you've been, it only has meaning because of the meaning that we give to it. Go ahead.
Well, and this is great because I think, the thing about Goodfight from other people I know who are in the fashion industry, you guys are in a way, and I apologize for like throwing these labels out to you and put them back at me if you dislike it, but you're kind of like a post-fashion brand in the sense that like right now, the biggest fashion brand is Balenciaga, right? Everybody is obsessed with Balenciaga, blah, blah, blah. Great. Okay, take that file away. But the people that are sort of the tastemakers that are kind of shepherding intentionally or unintentionally what fashion is and what it means now are all people who are like champions of Goodfight and love you guys, and from editors and writers and other stuff like that. And then also like, real heads. But if you guys are constantly changing, like you were saying, in terms of the product, what is it that you're able to do to like progress the brand? Because I know that there are other people that are going to hear this. They're going to be like, well, great. Like, but I'm trying to make a name for myself, or I want, I have this shirt and it sold well. Do I get rid of it? What are the things that you would kind of say to guide them a little bit forward?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And let me start off with the disclaimer of like everybody's path is different. And Andrew used to tell me that our industry is 20% hard work, 80% luck. And this is coming from somebody who works like it's 90% hard work. All right. But the reality is also like everything is also like, as much as we can do everything that we can do, but at the end of the day, there's also kind of a convergence of good fortune. And you hope that all the things that you kind of put forth and all the things that you work on will kind of like have that moment to kind of get that big break. And that's, the hard work is what goes into like, are you actually ready when the break comes? And again, not to say that like we've gotten our big break, like we're a very small brand. We're independently funded. And so we've always been trying to do some stuff, everything like step by step organically. But going back to your question, I think that for us personally, I think that our content has been changed. This is not to say like, oh yeah, if you have like a good thing, should you just throw it away? That's not necessarily what we believe in too. We have core styles that we run all the time and we try to be attentive to. I think we just always have a commitment to exploration. And that again, like, I think that's specific to our brand in terms of who we are and what our identity is, even as individuals, and the way that we design and the way that we think about things. And I think because of that, like our customer expects that from us. I think our customer expects, okay, like what's next for Goodfight? What's the next thing? What's the thing that they're going to do? But at the same time, I think you can kind of maintain other things. Like I think one thing that Julia always talks about is that we are extremely committed to like fabrication. I think customers know that when they buy products from us, it's going to feel a certain way. We are extremely kind of crazy about like fit and silhouettes and drape and different little nerdy things when it comes to clothes that maybe sometimes the customer doesn't notice. And maybe sometimes if we're doing our job right, the customer's not going to notice it because it's going to work perfectly, right? If the customer notices it, then sometimes maybe something's wrong. So that is like, for us, I think our constant is quality. Our constant is fit. Our constant is also storytelling. Like that's something I think that our customer always expects from us. So I think you can build consistency. Like any good business needs to have consistency, but I think that there's ways that you can build it other than just being one thing or just looking one way. And again, it's different for everybody. And that's just the path that we decided to take. And also because like, that's what's more fun for us. I think this goes back to like our background at OC. So the funny thing is like tie in with a few of the things that you mentioned before. I took a break from fashion after a while because I wanted to learn more about design. I started working for one of Will Smith's creative directors. So I was working for the Smith family. Really bizarre. I know it's like really random. I was a personal assistant to one of like the creative directors, which just means like I do everything from helping him put together decks to like picking up his car, and like literally sometimes, which was really exciting too, because when you're scrapping and you're a young kid and you're eating like 99-cent like Carl's Jr. burgers and you get to drive somebody's Range Rover to Will Smith's compound, that's pretty fucking cool. So that was a great experience for me. And my old boss, Drew Fitzgerald, who is one of Will's partners in the Just campaign. If you ever see like the Just water, those like blue bottles, like we helped. Well, that's Drew's project, and I helped with the sampling and the creation of that thing. So to actually see it in real life now is so cool. I mean, I've only a very, very tiny part in terms of the genesis of that, but what I was going to say was that at OC, the way that I ended up getting to work there was I was trying to pivot a little bit. That was the first time I tried to run away from fashion. I'm sorry, the Will Smith thing was the second time I tried to run away from fashion, right? So the first time I tried to run away from fashion, I took a break. And when I finally came back and I wanted to get back in the game, I talked to Johan. And at first I had tried to get a job at Club Monaco because one of my friends had told me, if you get a job at Club Monaco, maybe you can become a buyer because my friend's a buyer there. He just buys knits and he makes $90,000 a year. And he just like picks what scarves and stuff like that he wants to get. And if you go to Club Monaco, if you move your way up the ranks, then you can start working for Ralph Lauren. And that's how you can get
because they were at the time they were owned by Ralph Lauren.
So that's like what I thought I was like, this is my path to kind of like success and finding some at the time, again, like I was still just completely on the retail level. I go on an interview there. I do like a few rounds of interviews. I'm interviewing for like one of the manager positions and things are going really, really well. And then, you don't hear from them for 1 week, 2 weeks. I call to check back in. Of course, they tell me they gave the job to somebody else. And I still remember that moment that I'm in like a parking structure in Santa Monica and I just got that call and I call my mom and I start, this sounds really sad, but I start crying because I think I was so invested into this idea that this was my path to success and like having, and it felt so close. It's kind of like when you're at the end of like a video game and you're playing the final boss and it's one of those old games where you can't save it and the boss has like 2 little units of life left and you're about to kill him and then you fucking die and that crushing feeling that you have afterwards. Like that's how I felt. And then I remember at that time, my father had wanted me to go work for this pipe company, a stable job. There was somebody that he knew that could actually get me a job in this company that literally like makes pipes. They had a office near LAX and they supply all different kinds of companies and things like that. So I interview, I get the job. I turn it down. My dad.
Was the money good?
The money, no, it was terrible. It was, but it was stable. Okay. It was like entry level. I mean, super, super, super sure. Entry level like job for like a college grad. But it was stable and it was a job and everything like that. And I turned it down because I was like, I don't want to sell pipes. Like, this is fucking wild, right? I will do anything else. Like I had other jobs. I'd figured things out. And I remember my dad didn't talk to me for 3 days, and that never happened to me in my life. I'd always had really fortunate to have 2 amazing parents and always super, super close relationship with both of them. And I remember when I finally broke the ice with my dad, him telling me that the one thing that he regrets in life is not becoming a college professor. His life aspiration was to teach English literature and be a college professor. What this had to do with me working for a plastic company, I couldn't understand the correlation because I literally told him, I was like, Dad, that's why I can't go work for this company. Like, you have to understand, like, that's why I can't do this. I don't want to look back on my life and suddenly regret the choices that I made because I never tried. I was like, let me try to find my own way. I'm still young. If it doesn't work out, I'll do whatever kind of stable job that needs to be done. I'm not a bum. I work hard. The way that you've always taught me, like, just give me this chance to pursue this thing. So Johan tells me, this is like, hey, you should check out this store opening ceremony on La Cienega. They have this, it's a super unique store. It's like each room is merchandised kind of differently. It feels like you're walking through a house. So I go in with my resume and I walk in and I'm so intimidated. I literally like turn around and I like walk out because I'm like, there's no way this place is going to hire me. This place is like way too cool. Right. But then I muster up enough courage. I go back in and I'm exploring it. And this is at the time when OC, and I don't know if you remember, this is around like 2008. They had Nike Loop Wheeler. You walk in, you see the Sanrio Hello Kitty house. They have Nike Loop Wheeler on the rack in the front. They're one of the only places in the United States that has Nike Loop Wheeler at the time. You go upstairs, there's the Nam De Guerre room, there's the Band of Outsiders room, there's Alexander Wang, there's all these different kinds of things. Yeah. And I was like, holy shit, this place is amazing. And the people that were there were like so cool too. So I go and I apply and I apply and I get rejected. But it's different this time for some reason because I'm like, I need to work here. So the manager there, Jenny, who is like my second mom now, she's like, hey, I'm sorry, like we don't have any open slots. Maybe come back in a month. So a month later, like I come back and she's like, this kid's actually back here, right? I got rejected again. So I apply there 3 times. On the 3rd time, I write her like an email and I'm just like, hey, like just give me a shot. Like I believe that like this is for me. I know how to work hard. I know what it means to sacrifice. I'm going to be an asset to whatever that you guys are doing here. I just want to be part of it. And she told me later on, she was like, hey, like I felt like if I didn't give you a shot, I was going to miss out on something. So they let me in the door. And that's how I started at OC. And OC was so special because, man, at the time, like you remember, man, like I think when I first started working there, they had the Uniqlo collaboration that they were doing. Yeah. They started doing Timberland. Umberto had reached back and pulled out those water shoes that they did back in the day. It was just such.
Yeah, it was peak OC was that, and I think that's like right before Kenzo's stuff popped.
It was before Kenzo.
Yeah,
it was so amazing. We used to see Carol and Umberto like all the time in the shop. My first week working there, I'm working the shoes. That's where they stick you when you first start out in the back. You work the shoe section and you steam all the clothes as they come out of the back stock. And Kanye West walks out. He's coming in. This is the 808s and Heartbreaks high time. He's in a gray.
This is Michael Bastian's suit.
Yeah. Gray suit with the faux hawk. And he's in there and he's shopping and he's like, why are you not playing my music in here? I made my music to be played in stores like here. Amazing. Wow. That was literally my first week at OC. So it was a really special time to be there.
What'd your folks say when you get the job at OC? Because I think, before you kind of answered, like, something that I think happens, especially as you get older, is you realize the fragility and like humanness of your parents. In the sense that I think, like, when you're a little kid, you kind of think your parents are invincible. Mm-hmm. If you're lucky enough to have a good relationship with your parents, most of the people that have traditionally would almost idolize their parents, that they did this amazing thing. They're totally infallible. And then as you get older and you start to understand maybe the rest of the world, you now start to have this sort of like empathetic relationship with your parents, and to which, you see them like pushing their dreams on you that aren't yours, but they think this is what I wanted that would have made me happy. And so here's the formula and it needs to work on you. And all of a sudden you're like, holy shit, like, I think my parents might be wrong about something. Yeah. So like, what does that do to you when you start to feel like you're doing the right thing for you?
Man, that's hard. And this is like such a contrast from like listening to like Mobilaji's story or like Julie's story. These like, sometimes I like listen to stories like that and I'm like, oh my God, I'm so jealous of the freedom that you guys had. And I wish I was brave enough. Sometimes I look back and I wish that I was brave enough to kind of like break out earlier, but 100% like what you're saying is true. At the same time, I think my credit to my mom, when that whole situation with the pipe company and everything like that happened, like she was the one that actually coaxed my dad to be like, hey, let him try. Which is kind of crazy. She was like, let him try to pursue his dream. And that was, I think, a special moment for me. Kind of like, like exactly like you said, like me kind of like having that realization that I needed to take a different path and that it was going to be okay. And I knew that it was going to be okay because, like, again, like it's the same thing that I told Jenny when I was trying to work at OC. Like I was literally willing to do anything. Like I had no ego. I still, hopefully, I don't think I do either. Like to a certain extent, I think we all have a little bit of pride. But
we all do.
Yeah.
I'm Mr. Humble, but trust me, I'm an asshole.
Yeah.
You're good.
But for me, like I was really down to do anything. Like if you need me to cut up boxes, to just steam clothes for forever, like that's something my parents always taught me. I think that understanding of what hard work is and that ability to put my head down and just grind. And to also not have so much pride where like, I think I was willing to do whatever I needed to do. If I had to move back with my parents for a little bit, like I would need to do that, or I need to scrap or whatever. Like I have so many crazy stories of different places that I stayed, free rent, working on the same tube of toothpaste to try to make shit work. Even when I was working at OC, I was working 3 jobs at the same time. I was working at OC. I was still doing some intern work for 316. And I was writing for an online editorial called Evil Manito. And I was sleeping 4 hours a night. And that's how I first started there. I was literally 4 hours a night. I was working 7 days a week because I was trying to pursue my dream. I still didn't know exactly what it was, but all I knew was like, I need to do my best at all of this. And part of it is also maybe figuring out what's not me, what doesn't work, what I don't like, maybe what I'm not good at, and maybe what I really like. But I think that's what kind of took me there.
Have you, I mean, obviously it sounds like you're still close with your parents.
Yeah.
So they know where you're at now.
Yeah.
Are they into it?
Yeah, I think they finally accepted I don't think the OC days they accepted what was going on.
Okay, that's fine.
Again, like that was my grind out time. I think when I started working for American Rag was, that's when my situation kind of stabilized a little bit, and I was making a good salary and stuff like that. That's when they finally were like, oh, okay, like he figured this out. Like it's not just a dream anymore. Yeah, it's not just like him just kind of playing around. It's like he's got a real job. So when I became a buyer, so
do you have any kids?
No, not kids.
Okay, one thing that's clicked in my head. I have a kid, and I have a 4-year-old, and then I have another one on the way.
Congrats.
And thanks. But that, like, I think I hit an age where I was like really almost like rebellious to my parents in the sense. I remember I like reamed my mom out at a coffee shop in New York for all the stuff that I really wanted when I was a kid that I didn't get. And, I was not like some deprived little kid. But there was stuff I wanted to do. Like I wanted to be like a Boy Scout, which is like, God, I dodged a bullet there, right? But all these things that like I wanted that I didn't get. And I remember I like just reamed my mom, and she was like, I'm so sorry. She's like, we were just trying our best.
Yeah.
She's like, we were just trying our best. And I was like, fuck. Like it just like my head exploded. And now as a parent, a part of me is like, oh man, I want to make sure that my daughter, my son, they're set up and that they're safe and that they're secure.
Yeah.
But, it sounds like all the stuff that you had, the skill sets, the drive, the ethic, all that was stuff that you got from your parents. And it's tough because it's like you want to communicate to them where it's like, I'm actually doing what you raised me to do.
Right.
It's just not the path you had.
Yeah.
And that's good.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's tough.
That's true. I mean, it's funny because even as, say, like sometimes our like views on life, our political views or different kinds of things like that have diverged a little bit. I remember my mom telling me one time, she's like, oh, I don't know when you became so socialist, And I was like, Mom, like everything you taught me has brought me into this point. Like I'm not the way that I am because of like what they taught me in college. All right. Like, I don't even fucking.
You went to some liberal school.
I don't fucking
messed you up.
Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, I barely remember what I learned in college. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's all the things that you instilled in me in terms of like, again, like ideas of integrity, ideas of sacrifice, ideas of, all those different kinds of things, like, is what makes me be like, yeah, maybe universal healthcare, like, is an interesting idea, Like, now the route that we get to it is, we don't need to get into that. That's all different for everybody. Sure. And I understand also that the problem is not as simple as we'd like to make it. But yeah, like, I was like, I think that that's an interesting idea, not because of college, but because of you,
Yeah.
Like, so, yeah. So I think that they had that kind of moment. I think that I am super, super thankful for so many things that like I learned from them. And I think the one area is just, I wish that I tried, again, like in a way, sometimes I don't necessarily like blame it on them. Like, I just wish that for some things I know that like you can't take back things and we all kind of like move forward and kind of make the most of like what we have and what we've accomplished. But I wish that if I could quote unquote do it all over again, I just wish that I tried more things. And was brave enough to do that. And that's what I tell. I have a little brother who's 19 years younger than me from the same parents, which is a miracle.
Okay.
And that's what I tell him all the time is, I'm not telling you to go be crazy, but I'm telling you like try things. And one of the big things that you realize too is, and this is the blessing of what our parents have gained from us. It's not that like my parents or our parents needed to do it the way that we did it. Like, again, a lot of things is they probably want a lot of the same things that we want. Again, like going back to my dad's conversation about wishing that he could be a college professor. Like, this is a man who walks around when he's commuting back and forth between work on the New York subway. He reads the fucking dictionary. All right. You know what he gave me when I was a kid to read Brothers of Karamazov. I was like in elementary school. I was like, what is this? I was like, I don't understand anything that's going on here. This isn't Boxcar Children. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, he's throwing some like top tier Russian literature at you.
I mean, he's like, you know what I mean? Like, and that was my dad. That was his passion. So like, we want the same things, but also like, I think we have the wherewithal now to also understand that our parents also maybe didn't have everything that we have. And sometimes like they just had to survive. They didn't have an opportunity to have the space to do. And
Scarcity mentality versus abundance mentality.
Yeah. And I think that's the blessing of what they've gained for us. And so part of it is in kind of taking that power and I think scaring them a little bit is part of like, you gave me the opportunity to do this. And so I'm making the most of it because you couldn't. And that was, I think that was, that was part of my journey, I think.
You had mentioned earlier, you're like, oh, if I could have done it all over again, I wish I would have like tried other things.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it kind of sounds like you've gotten to try quite a few things, and you're also not, 96 years old. Like you're the founder or a co-founder of a incredible brand. You have all this other life experience. It sounds like, regardless, intentional or not, you're this mentor for people in terms of how to rethink their business and how to exist and be independent. So, like, are you happy?
I am, actually.
All right.
And I think the older we get, the more kind of philosophical we get about these things, the more we kind of
like, well, fuck, what is happiness, man?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly, man. And it's like, especially too, I think as the wheels start to come off, and you wake up in the morning with new pain that you have no idea. I've been struggling with plantar fasciitis since January.
Are you a runner or were?
I wasn't, which is the problem. Is I started running in January. Like I've always been like really active, but I stopped kind of more of the cardio aspect. I was doing like a lot of like I was boxing, I was doing jujitsu, and then I was doing kind of, as the pandemic hit, kind of like a lot of high intensity exercise. So I started trying to kind of give back to myself. I started running in January, and that's how I kind of injured myself. So, but I mean, like I think like as you kind of go and I think come to terms a little bit more and not to get super serious, but like come to terms with like our own mortality, like in the sense of like this idea that, and I feel like especially now and especially in light of all the things that are going on, that like we can't ignore, whether it's a broader global sense, whether it's the things that happened this past weekend or that are always happening. That's not just, specific to that. You start to come to terms with this idea that like, okay, like I'm not going to live forever, but also maybe like that's not such a bad thing. And maybe that also means like, if I really, I think, wrestle with that idea that my time here is limited, like, how do I want to handle myself? And so I think like I'm happy in the sense of like, one, I think I have a lot to be thankful for, but also two, I think one of the biggest journeys for me personally has been this understanding of becoming more honest with myself and trying to dig deeper within. And I think that that's something that like has been giving me a lot of happiness, has been kind of figuring that out. And like, okay, like I'm okay with that. I'm not okay with that. I'm going to do this, something that maybe I never would have done before because I was too scared to do it before. And I think that's what courage is now is, again, it's not about not being afraid, but it's about this idea of being able to step out and do the things that you feel like you need to do or you want to do. And to be able to kind of move forward in that power. So
that's heavy shit.
Yeah, it's already super, super philosophical. If you haven't watched the movie Everything Everywhere All at Once.
Oh, seen it twice.
Oh, so good.
That's a multiverse movie.
Yes.
That's a real Marvel movie. That's not a Marvel movie.
Yeah.
Not that I'm hating on Marvel because I love any sort of superhero story, but yeah, but no, it's freaking crazy. I don't even know how to explain it other than like you have to see it. But I definitely went and saw it again.
Yeah.
It's just and it's cool because everyone that's in it, it's so non-traditional.
Yeah, it is. It is in the greatest sense of the term. Yeah. I mean, I think it's so exciting because I get to have these conversations with Christina, who obviously is a partner in our company, but also she works full time as an agent at CAA.
Oh, geez.
Yes.
That's right.
Yeah. Like a real job. And I mean,
it's a different job. They're
job.
All real.
Yes. Asterisk, right? So, but she, I mean, I think she gives us a lot of perspective just from the sense of like, she's handling like, literally we'll be in Paris doing showroom and she's like on the phone, like closing like a multi-million-dollar deal or like on the phone with like the Star Wars team or something like that, you know?
Oh, I freaking love that. So like one of the advisors of like Blammo, like media, whatever you want to call it, like the larger thing that we're trying to create comes from a entertainment background. And And, I've been lucky enough to have a lot of other friends who work in the industry that have tried to encourage me or, and look out for me, whether it's media growth, whatever that is.
Yeah.
And the ability to just speak about things so casually that to me is like somebody is breaking down Da Vinci's Last Supper.
Yeah.
And they're just talking about deals with this and, oh, this is super easy.
Yeah.
Oh, I know the person over there.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wait, those are the people that make the movies that I watch in my house, like, or the things that I see on huge screens or like the celebrities of this. I always think that's just so freaking cool because most of the time they're like, oh, I listened to this and I'm like, what? You were listening? Like, you actually give a shit? Like, you realize that like you're making the world move and I'm, being a goofball. So it's...
No, that's so interesting. I mean, I think there's like two things to that. One, a little bit behind the scenes here at Goodfight. We're actually just in the process of moving into a new office. But
congrats.
Through the pandemic, and we started the business literally in like our side room, and it's kind of taken over me and Christina's loft here in LA. And during the pandemic, Christina was sequestered very quickly to our fabric room because she was trying to do her calls and stuff like that. And she'd be on like a call with so-and-so, upstairs, and we'd have to be all quiet downstairs as we're like working on like tech packs and looking over patterns and stuff like that. And, so a lot of people, like when it first started, people were like, where are you? Until she turned her camera around. But what's so interesting too is like literally I'll be pulling fabric for a sample and she'll be in there on the phone with like she signed Ho-Yeon from Squid Game.
Yeah.
So we've all watched that crazy show, and to literally walk in there and to hear Ho-Yeon's voice, like and my wife just like talking to her so casually, I was like, oh my, it just really puts everything in perspective. You know what I mean? And you're just like, oh my God, what am I doing here? I'm just selling clothes. You know what I mean? Like this is, but I think this also opens up like a more interesting question too, in terms of like, again, going back to like this idea of like, like, oh, what's our purpose, or are our parents proud of us, and XYZ? Like, why do we do what we do? That's also the power of art too. As I tell my wife all the time, I'm like, I don't know if you realize it, but you're literally involved in the business that like shapes culture. Like,
especially now
in terms of going into the places where you cannot go as a diplomat, as a politician, as a whatever, even as a businessman, right? Like one of my good friends from college, she speaks perfect English because she watched Disney movies growing up. So many people grow up and they watch The Goonies, or they watched Seven, or different kinds of things like that. Like that literally changed the way that they see the world,
right?
Because of what they saw on the silver screen. So it's like people can say that it's frivolous, people can say that doesn't matter, but at the same time, like there's so much power that they hold, and is kind of, maybe if you want to talk about the responsibility of art, go back to that Spider-Man reference, which I know you'll appreciate, that with great power comes great responsibility. Throw that in there really quick. Like that's what it is in terms of like our industry, right? So
yeah, I mean, absolutely.
Yeah.
Jeez. Well, Caleb, this has been incredible. I'm so grateful to have gotten to chat with you today. Before we wrap, I have a bunch of random non sequitur goofy questions and things to discuss with you. These are just straight from the dome, and wherever we go with it, it's fine.
Cool.
If you were making a YouTube how-to video, what would the subject be?
You know what? I do think that like a lot of people, like going back to what you're talking about, when you have like a lot of young kids that are trying to start brands or figure themselves out, I feel like maybe I do kind of like a how-to of like how to talk to people, how to approach people, how to talk to vendors. Different things like that, of like kind of how to get into the business. Because I think that's, like you mentioned before, I think me being able to try the different things that I've tried and connect with the people that I have, I think that's what's kind of given me the opportunity, is that being able to connect with other human beings.
Yeah. Last movie you saw that you liked?
Christina was able to get me into the IMAX pre-screening of Top Gun 2, Top Gun Maverick. Oh. Fucking awesome. And so
really
important, because I think like when I was a little kid, I wanted to be a fighter pilot. And then when I realized that like,
me too,
my eyesight was too fucked. I wanted to be an aeronautical engineer. So I used to watch Top Gun like religiously. I think it's better than the first one, man.
Wow. Well, but see, this is tough because the first one didn't have the nostalgia part. And I feel like there's a level of nostalgia in this new one.
That's absolutely true. It's kind of like a Rocky Balboa kind of thing. How Rocky Balboa
Yeah.
was probably, again, this is very arguable, but from like a very flatline sense, maybe that was like the best Rocky next to Creed.
Sure. Yeah.
But yeah, Top Gun 2. Wow. And so watching it in IMAX, because there's so much more with technology and what they can do now. And then watching it in IMAX with the sound and with the screen. And there's so much more kind of in cockpit action that isn't like some model spinning on like a blue screen or a green screen, you know, like it's rad. And yeah, the nostalgia factor obviously plays into it too, undoubtedly.
They stopped production in that movie, they finished the movie in like 2018 or 2019 or something like that.
Yeah.
It's just been delayed from the pandemic.
Yeah. And then they finished it. And then I think they finished in the pandemic.
Right.
And then they held on to it because they knew they wanted to wait until it could go to the big screen, which I think was a good move. And it's gonna, I think when it opens, I think it's opening next weekend. It's gonna kill the box office. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm psyched for it. I'm really psyched for it. I finally saw the like any other dork. I saw the Doctor Strange movie,
I did too.
like opening night.
I watched Doctor Strange the day before by myself. That's a big thing for me. Sometimes like I like to go watch movies by myself. I go watch at the Alamo Draft House here in LA because you can order beer,
food and chill out
and stuff like that. So I like to go there, real covert styles. I love Doctor Strange. People are so mad about this movie, and
I mean, people are mad. Period.
It's a Sam Raimi movie. I enjoyed it. I was just like, hey, this is what it is. This isn't Endgame.
Well, did you read the comics? Do you know like the story that they reference and all that stuff?
Yeah.
Because that's the thing is everyone's like, oh, they're setting up Secret Wars, which that's not a spoiler or anything that I said whatsoever.
Yeah.
And they're setting that up. Mm-hmm. I think it's just the biggest thing that caught people off guard is that you could see when the reshoots happened.
Oh.
And, because that movie, I don't know every bit of details and more and stuff has come out about it, but it was like, apparently the original cut was not good and they did quite a bit of reshoots way later.
Sad.
So whatever. Who cares? I thought it was fun.
Yeah.
I was like, that's cool.
Like the Eternals. I don't think...
the Eternals. Hold on.
Okay. I don't think it was a perfect movie. I'm not here to say that it was a good movie, but I think for me right now, there's just not as many people doing like high fantasy and things like that.
Yeah.
And obviously because it costs a lot of money too. And I have completely had my fill. Like when I'm watching stuff at the end of the day, like I think we have so much to deal with in real life that I do watch everything, but at the same time, obviously like Christina, especially, she's about to go to like Cannes on Wednesday. Like we'd watch all the serious stuff and all the really gritty stuff and all the stuff that's like kind of real life. But again, that's why I really loved Black Panther. And that's why I think Black Panther is such a sneaky, amazing movie, because people don't realize that Black Panther is, it's not just a superhero movie, but it's I'm hesitant to talk about this, but because I'm not Black, but it's a story about the third culture experience. And I think I can empathize with it again as a third culture kid.
Can you describe what a third culture person is for folks who don't know what you're talking about?
Yeah, so it's I guess broadly, I haven't really thought about this academically, but it's kind of like, for me, being raised, even though I was born here in the US, my first language was Chinese, and I had to go to ESL when I first went to school, and I didn't understand what anybody was saying. The kind of family that I was, at the same time, like here in the US, I'm not always considered American. People see me as other. And then when I go back to Asia, I'm not considered Asian. I'm considered American. And so it's this kind of like, which was, again, kind of going back to what I first talked about, is that struggle. I think that I've dealt with a lot, that again, going back to, again, what I said about like Goodfight being a living document, I feel like, again, Goodfight is also kind of like this discovery, this constant like discovery and more of like what it means to like what we want to bring people to the table. I think the whole beauty of third culture identity is this ability to kind of walk between worlds. And it used to frustrate the shit out of me, because I always, as a kid, you want to fit in, right? You don't want to be called weird or, thought of in certain ways or whatever. And I could never find a place for myself, and I tried to, even when I tried to find it in other kind of like subversive things, whether that was music or things like that, I also still wasn't finding anything that felt like me, right? I thought that I was Allen Iverson when I first started going to college, because that's what I wanted to be. So I had my phase of all the gear and the chains and everything, because that's who I admired. But at the same time, that still wasn't me. And I remember the first time that I first started becoming more comfortable in my own skin. I remember the first time, like, I tried on a Junya Watanabe jacket, and I was like, going back to kind of the nerdy part of what we do, I was like, holy shit, this jacket fits me. And oh my God, like, I opened up this lookbook and there's people that look like me wearing these clothes, and I put on these pants and it's actually cropped to the height that is right for my body. Because whenever I try to wear things a lot of times that were normal for the people that I grew up around, it always didn't exactly work for me. You know what I mean? And so I think finding that in between and finding where you can kind of take a little bit of this and that without being a culture vulture, but also I think from the perspective of kind of like finding something new, but then also like dealing with that tension of feeling the disconnect. Like, so again, I'm going to go back to Black Panther really quickly, but there was one thing I want to touch about.
You're okay.
The Goodfight thing is, so the Black Panther thing is that, like, the main character of that story is not T'Challa. It's Killmonger. The movie starts out in Oakland, right? And it's literally about a displaced individual who doesn't even realize that he's from kind of like another world, another almost like universe, and that he's like not just anybody, he's a prince, right? And within the film, it's this kind of conflict of him trying to rediscover that identity. And that's something even Ryan Coogler went through. He talks about going through as he, I think Kendrick even talked about it too, when he was working on the soundtrack for the film, going back to Africa for the first time and rediscovering that. And the film is so awesome and so fantastical and so rad with all the special effects and everything like that. And also in terms of trying to express ideas that were not African from a Western perspective, but African from an African perspective, I think was what they were hoping to try to do. And not just kind of like putting things out on someone else's terms, on colonial terms, as Shuri would say, the colonizers. And that film is so powerful. So when you hear the music, I don't know if you remember that scene in Infinity Wars when they got to do something and Captain America's like, they're like, oh, we got to do this thing. Like, who has the technology to actually accomplish it? And like Captain America's like, I know a place we can do it. And suddenly all of a sudden it's like Wakanda, and you hear the music and you see Chadwick Boseman, you see him walking up, and just even with his gait, he's got that Black Panther walk, and then you hear the music. And when I was watching that film, which was like fucking raw, right? I don't know if you felt like this way. Like, my legs are shaking because there's nothing sacred in that film. Like, people were dying and all kinds of crazy stuff is happening. When you see that part in that film, I don't know how it was when you watched it. My entire theater started cheering, almost like fucking standing ovation. And it took me out of the film in a good way. Like, there's sometimes when you get taken out of the film, when actor breaks character, he messes up his accent or something like that, and you're like, oh, that's an actor. I'm suddenly kind of taken back to reality. It took me out of the film in such an amazing way, where it was like, Black Panther took me to somewhere special, but at the same time, didn't take me to some fantasy that was detached from what was going on here in real life in terms of what we wrestle with. And in that brief moment in Infinity War, when suddenly you see Wakanda, I was like, oh shit, I remember what matters. I'm remembering what matters. And at the same time, I'm still in this universe. I'm still in Wakanda. I'm still seeing everything that's here. But at the same time, it's a reminder to me, like, oh, it's not just about the movies. It's not just about like superheroes and fantasies and kind of imaginary things. There's like a real struggle that's going on outside this movie theater right now, maybe inside this movie theater too, that we're all wrestling with and we're all trying to find our place in. And that's still there. And to me, that's what was so powerful about that movie. Whether or not like people interpret it as a perfect movie or not, that's why it's so important. You know, more than just seeing, people always talk about, I think, like seeing someone that looks like them, like even like I mentioned that in terms of like the Junya Watanabe thing. But sometimes I think it's almost more about kind of digging deeper in terms of creating space or kind of like creating a shock to the system that kind of like opens our eyes a little bit more.
No, I mean, that's awesome. And yeah, thanks for sharing that. I think that's, you know, it makes me want to go back and rewatch Black Panther first off, because I saw it in theaters, but I haven't seen it again since. I remember people losing their shit over it. And I also, you know, in Infinity War too, I remember when, Yeah, when they go to Wakanda. And by the way, if we just spoiled Infinity War for you, like, sorry, it's been out for a while. But like, yeah, I think that's the thing of superhero movies, and more importantly, stories that really help people escape and then reinsert themselves into reality with a different perspective. Because so much of storytelling, and this is why Star Wars was so good, it's like just the concept of like the hero's journey, right? Where like you go and you learn and you're changed and you return it, and being able to remove yourself from your situation, whether it's, pain or whatever that is, but being able to escape into something else and going on the journey with that character, you can never 100% escape the world. But you're able to do that a little bit from it. And so you get the perspective of what the character experiences. And then the weight of that experience is so much heavier because now this is like what you're talking about with your parents, right? Now there's like this empathetic connection, right? Absolutely. That like this shared frustration. And even as, a white person who I've never been persecuted for my ethnicity or anything. I've been made fun of, but like I have no understanding of prejudice of stuff that minorities and other people have like been persecuted to. You had an understanding because I fell in love with these characters so much that when they hurt, you're hurting. And I think like that's a thing too, that when you start to see how that actually exists in the real world, you're like, holy shit, like, and it's made me want to ask more questions and to try to really listen than just say, well, like, I don't think you're right, and that's the thing. When I don't know what comedian said it. It might have been like Hassan Minaj or whenever, when he was like, hey, I know how we can fix the whole world. Like, we should all watch Black Panther together. like he basically just like talked about like how a movie like that would just unite everyone because we all love superheroes, and like that's really what we're battling against is acceptance and love and so.
No, I mean, I think that's the thing. I mean, and even though he might have kind of like partially said that as a joke, I think there's some truth in that, in the sense of like,
oh, absolutely.
Like we did a season, Fall Winter 19 was called Familiar Piety, and it was a season that was inspired by Chefs on Break, and how every international city that you go to, in the alleyways, you'll always see kind of like chefs like crouched in the alleyway, smoking a cigarette on their cell phone. And they're usually wearing like an apron, but each one is kind of dressed differently. But maybe they have a t-shirt, or they had like a sports jersey of like their favorite sports team, or everything else. And that's kind of like what inspired that season, of this idea of how everyone kind of has a personal story that they take along in their struggle. And we also centered around the fact that food has this kind of like powerful, how food has a power to bring disparate people to a table together. And how, it's funny because I think that's one of the big things that we lost in the pandemic, which is again ironic that we're standing on the precipice of another world war, potentially. I hope not. But that what was lost was this ability to walk into a random place and share a table with somebody, or share a counter with somebody. Like, I don't know if like you ever had like the opportunity, especially like going to Asia, going to different kinds of.
Oh, I've been to wet markets in Hong Kong and stuff, and
you're sitting there and you're just kind of like, oh, like suddenly, like literally, like the plane is leveled, and you're just there as kind of like a partaker, as a learner, right? And like we always talk about Goodfight as a bridge in terms of like our hope. Our hope is to bring different people to the table together. People who maybe don't even necessarily agree on things. People that like the Eternals, and people that don't like the Eternals to the table. And there's a reason. There always has to be something that brings them together. Because at the end of the day, like we can all stand on different sides and shout at each other, right? Or we can come together and not assimilate, not acquiesce, not have to be anything different than we actually are. We can be ourselves, but like what we try to show in Goodfight is it's not like one thing taking over the other. It's not one thing erasing the other. Our Eastern influence and our Western influence are not mutually exclusive. It's this idea that when you take two things that sometimes feel paradoxical or that feel dissonant and they come together, they actually create something really amazing.
Right.
And
Yeah, I mean, we're stronger together than,
And
absolutely.
and this idea that like exactly what you were saying before, where it's like we have so much to learn from each other. Like we have so much to learn from each other. Like even I'm so curious now, even like outside of this, like I hope to be able to catch a drink with you or a meal with you and to be like, what was it like trying to become a musician in New York? Like fucking hard, you know what I mean? Like such a crazy journey. And how did that take you to fashion, you know, or talking about, you know, where is fashion going right now? Or what do you think about film or blah, blah, blah. Like, this is the thing where it's like, we might not agree on things, but at the same time, like it changes. And these are the things that kind of change you. I remember asking, I was talking to Chris Gibbs one time because, you know, we used to be neighbors. He was in the shop hanging out. And I was like, yo, Chris, what do you think about all these other businesses coming to LA and opening up stores? This is before the pandemic. This is when I was like, maybe like 2006, 2015, 2016. So many people were coming and opening stores in LA. And I remember what he said to me that just like shook me. He was like, you know what, man? I'll never try to judge another man's business. I'm just trying to figure out my own. And I was like,
isn't that fucking crazy? Like Chris Gibbs is on such he's on such an elevated level, and he's so humble about everything that I actually feel like he's like he's detached from all reality and in the best possible way, in the sense that, like, you know, he's playing chess and everyone else is playing checkers. Like he knows what he's doing. He's built a great business. He's 100% aware of the rest of the world that exists outside of his business, and he's content. And that is the thing that's like the most, you know, to tie this back to fashion and everything else, in, you know, when people talk about like Love and 316 and all this stuff, it's like, because they're not trying to be $100 million brand in 2 years. They're like slow growth, recognizing that longevity will always be far more important than any sort of hype. You know, and just being content with little incremental growth that happens over time. And like someone like Chris Gibbs, he's very aware of that. He knows what it means to not own his own business. He knows all the bullshit that comes from owning your own business and not trying to just, like, you know, get the world in a day. And I think that is, and I don't know if it's spirituality or what that is that keeps him grounded. I mean, and him and I, we've had a bunch of chats like off the record that I've been like peeling my brain from the ceiling after we're done, where I'm just in awe of his genius. And, you know, because for him, he always ties it back to just being like, I got kids and I'm trying to keep this world, you know, and be sane and like be able to like take care of my kids. And the fact that like his drive is not the Patek Philippe, it's not the G-Wagon, it's not any of these other things, surrounded in a city where that's thrown at you more than ever. It's just that, like, I just want my kids to have a good education. You're just like,
But that's the beauty. I think like he's playing in chess, just being himself. Again, kind of coming back to this idea of like finding who you are. And at the same time, like that's what makes Union special too. I think like at one point Union was so important in Los Angeles because it was kind of like that one outlet for all those special brands that you couldn't get anywhere else, which obviously has changed as the industry has evolved, but also they've evolved at the times. And at the same time too, it was kind of like you were saying before, even of this idea of like, as a brand, like you can't just make stuff. Like one of the things that makes me so happy is, and Chris, if you're listening to this, don't feel any pressure to always keep it like this way, especially not from me. But just walking into the store and he's got these LCD screens up on the wall and it's playing the news. And that's so sick. I fucking love that. You know what I mean? Like what he's trying to do as an organization, as a brand, is not detached to like where he exists on this plane in this world. Understanding that like we don't live in a vacuum. And I'm like, that is so sick. You know what I mean? And he goes out with his staff to go like clean up the city periodically just to like keep them all grounded. Like that's, you know what I mean? Like, you know, for us, like my wife, like when we first started the band, she was always like, what's success to you? And I was like, man, like, I'm not sure. She was like, you know what success is to me? And I was expecting her to be like, cause she's usually the money person. She's the making sure we're actually like not killing
annual
ourselves.
Revenue exceeding blank.
She's the red pen, you know, person. So, but she said, if in 10 years, someone that used to work for us goes on and becomes more successful than we are, carries our same DNA of integrity, of kindness, of paying the people that we work with, that our vendors and the people that sew our clothes and different things like that properly, and like treat customers with respect. Like if someone keeps on that DNA and goes and is more successful than us, then we succeeded. Because like our designer Calvin, he says all the time, like if what we're trying to do dies with us, like we failed, like that was cool. Like that's fine. But like this it's bigger than us,
Right.
As small as it is in terms of like this little corner of the earth that we have,
And she's like, by the way, I'll be back in 10 minutes. I gotta go set some Star Wars movies.
Yeah. At the same time, she's like literally like, yeah, it's great. It's she was like, cool. You want to come to Cannes with me? I was like, I wish I could.
Wait, why aren't you going? Come on,
we
man.
have we actually have an event this weekend, and then also like we're in the process of after 5 years,
you're
finally
moving
into a new space. We're going to actually have a little retail space there too.
Nice. That's great.
Going to be exciting because as of right now, when people in the US, they always ask us if there's a store they can go to, and we always have to direct them to Dover and Union, which is cool. Again,
yeah, that's a nice flex to be able to say like, oh, just the two best retail stores.
Again, a huge blessing.
Right.
The story actually of even getting into Dover is kind of wild, but
go for it. What happened?
So when we first started the brand, we went and kind of gave our best effort. Julia worked and continues to work as a stylist. So another stylist that she worked under, Karen Kaiser, who's again also an amazing person too, was very good friends with Daphne Seybold, who used to run CDG, Dover Streets communications and PR and stuff, right? So she had sent our lookbook over to Daphne. Daphne had sent it over to the buying team, say like, hey, check this out. This is a new brand that's starting out. At the same time, we had just like bombed Vogue with like, doing those like 46 different emails that like somebody sent to us, just wide spray this to like everybody that we can. And interestingly enough, Tani had actually reached back out to us, forwarded us over to Michael Faluzzi, who then sent us over to Edward Barsamian and had us we had just done a showroom in New York City, which we were trying to get people out to. And we actually got back to LA and then flew straight back to New York to go to One World Trade and show Vogue our first collection. So after that, we go back to LA, and all of a sudden we get an email from one of the buyers, Marissa, at Dover Street, who's like reaches out and is like, oh, like, can you come by and show us the stuff? And I was like, oh, we're actually back in LA, but I'm just like, at this point, I'm like, we'll come back if you want. She's like, no, it's fine. Cause like for us, it was like when we first started making clothes, like it was not our intention or any part of our imagination that we'd ever get to work with Dover. Fast forward 5 years, we're doing an archive collection for them we're in all 6 of their stores internationally. And she was like, no, don't come. We'll just see you next season in Paris. And I was like, oh, damn, we missed our chance, right? Maybe we should have lingered in New York or something, right? Next season, our first showroom in New York, in Paris. This is our first showroom ever. They actually reach back out and they come back out. Dover Street comes back out with a few of the international buyers to come to our showroom. We saw them. We saw Jackie and Ricky from Road and Gray. We saw the guys from Essence, a few other people like that, a handful of people that came by. And we come back, months of silence. Don't hear from anybody, right? And,
silence after you hit them up?
Silence after we hit them up to do the follow-up. Hey, how's it going? Do you need any other information? Et cetera, et cetera.
Hope this finds you well.
Exactly. You know exactly how that email goes, right?
Yeah. I hate that shit, but I do too.
We all have to do the song and dance at some point, right? So we're back with one of our friends, and we're eating at a place in Silver Lake, and we're just like, okay, well, that just didn't go anywhere. We spent all this money to go to Paris. Whatever, like we know what we're still trying to do. We're kind of rationing our funds decently, so we still had some runaway. But I'm meeting up with my old friends, Makoto Tachibana, and one of his best friends had just committed suicide. And so he's just in this different space, and he's like, why do you guys do what you do? And I remember telling him like, hey man, like, you know what? Like we just went to Paris. We've done all this stuff. This is our second season. It's like our first season of trying to like show it to buyers. We know what we stand for, and we hope that we can make a little bit of a change in the world. And even if we failed, like at least we tried. and we're going to keep on going as long as we can. And literally at that same second, my phone flashes and it's an email from Marissa saying, hey, we're so sorry this took a while, but we're happy to place our first order with you guys. And that was our first order that we ever got from any retailer.
So your first...
Yeah, Dover, New York. Shout out Dover, New York. Shout out James, Marissa, Eileen, all the old Ari, Maddie, all the old crew there.
But here's the thing, and I want to call this out too, because people do like stick their neck out for folks, and people actually take pity on people. But when it's their job, it's very different, you know, because I know I've talked to people in the past, they're like, yeah, we just lucked out. Like, we were so lucky. Like, and you're like, no. Like, obviously what you did and what you were making was so good enough that Dover actually was like, oh, we could make money off of this, right? And I'm not belittling them in the slightest. I'm saying that, like, it's testament to what you made and created. But the biggest thing, and this is where people ask me this all the time, and I try to give advice to people and try to abide by this myself, where it's like, your reputation, you can't, like, it's the most important thing.
Absolutely.
And I think the fact that, like, you all had existed and there's a lot of circles of other people who knew you and could say good things about you and all that, like, I mean, that's it. And that in combination with the fact that you're making clothes that were dope, I mean, I'm sure helped.
We had so much support.
But, like,
like you said, from
but you earned it though, from the stuff that, whether it was eating the shit at some place that you didn't want to be, or, you know, just like humbling yourself at any other place like that, that matters. Like, if a positive word from Chris Gibbs about how he knew you, or any of that stuff like that, that matters in your reputation. And I think all that stuff that you guys did, I mean, that's why you're good and successful. Yeah. It's just
actually one of my
trying to maintain
my buyers at Dover, actually, and he's doing great right now. Actually, he just relaunched his own line, but he had a brand before, that he came and showed me the brand when I was at American Rag. And I always made it like my policy of like, hey, like, treat everybody with respect. You don't know where people are going to end up. Sometimes you don't have time to answer every single email, but try to give everybody their due. And I remember, like, kind of giving him his time and looking at his collection. And even though I didn't pick it up at the time, just because we had a lot of other kind of similar brands in the store at the moment. Years later, fast forward, he's our buyer at Dover. And it's like, good thing I did not fuck that up.
See? Yeah. I mean, that's the stuff I'm trying to beat. But it's like, you know, but it's not like you operated with that mentality in a selfish way, because I'm like, oh, I need to be nice to all these people because I need them to help me later. It's just like, no, just be a nice person.
Yeah, because also that, like, at the end of the day, when you take all this stuff apart, it's like, what do we have left? You know what I mean? Like, all the stuff, you know, like, like, shout out Austin, Jacob from WSJ, Gian, like, all these other guys, like, in New York, in the industry, Joe Sadler and Derek Busey from Quest, like, Yuki from Yucatan, like, all these guys that supported us, and gave us a shot. Funny story was also, like, we almost got into OC, but ended up not getting into there, and then got into Dover. And obviously, you know, again, so much love for OC and everything that we learned there, that we carry in our DNA. But, you know, obviously, like, we're really lucky to kind of, like, be where we are right now with the partners that we have. So
right. Damn, this is really, really good. It's funny because one of the questions that I try to ask everyone is, like, a movie or book that when someone mentions, you feel they understand you. And your rant of Black Panther, I feel like, was the thing.
Oh, but my favorite movie is Pan's Labyrinth.
Pan's Labyrinth?
Guillermo del Toro.
What? I'm very familiar. I mean, Guillermo is the freaking godfather. But, like, what about Pan's Labyrinth? Just, I mean, there's a lot of reconciliation, underdog redemption stories that I feel like kind of run through the pattern of the things that
I think
you
love. And that's true. I mean, that's true definitely to, like, a certain sense, from, like, AI to the Steph Curry. Two very different, two very, very different individuals, different paths too.
Yeah. Yes.
Two majorly different.
Pan's Labyrinth.
I feel like Pan's Labyrinth is actually a little bit different because a lot of times I think like people like certain things or like certain players or like certain books because they see some of themselves in it. I don't think I like Pan's Labyrinth because I see it as something that's reflective of anything necessarily within my own life. I think that film is so compelling and so fantastical in the way that Guillermo weaves fantasy and reality and kind of like this mind fuck of like, wait, what's real right now? Is the fawn real?
Yeah.
Is obviously in the backdrop of the Spanish Civil War and the realities of the horrors of that. Like what is real? And I think like the power of that film has just always just like shaken me. I remember one time I was like literally in like a tea shop in Westwood and they had like a little TV screen that they put movies on that like sometimes people pay attention to or not. They had put on Pan's Labyrinth and literally, because everybody's in there, they're either like talking with friends or they're studying, right? It's like a college campus offshoot, you know?
Yeah.
Everyone, I remember looking around and I was just watching the film. I'd already seen it and I was watching the film. And
that's a wild movie
I know,
to have
and
on
just
in
like
the background,
in a
by the
tea
way.
shop,
There's some
like, like what is
stuff
going on,
yeah.
right? The part with the bottle.
Yeah, exactly.
Shit. So like I stepped back and I'm looking around and I'm like, everybody stopped what they were doing. Literally the person who's like shaking tea on the side is like stopped like mid shake and they're all watching the film. And I think that the power of that, I feel like I've had a few moments of like that in my life. The other time I was watching the Lakers Pistons series, I think it was game 3 or game 4, standing outside of the college rec center, watching a TV through the glass and seeing Kobe hit a 3 over Rip Hamilton to send the game into overtime and hearing the entire campus, what sounded like all of LA, erupt and being like, whoa, there's something bigger than me that's going on right now. And I need to just like kind of touch it somehow. And I think like Pan's Labyrinth has that kind of like same kind of feeling where it's kind of like, this is something that's like, it's bigger than me. It has a power that I can't explain. And I think as humans, like we're always trying to explain things and have power over them and control them. But like, this is like, you can't explain it. This shit's too crazy, you know, which is again, like, yeah, if like you go back into people talking about Virgil and what he did at LV, I feel like was not about, there's a guy that looks like me that is in that position now.
Yeah.
What Virgil was doing at LV, and me and Jacob talked a little bit about this the last time we were in New York. I was in New York. He was saying that the world that you have always perceived to be this way is not that. This is how I believe. Like he talks about doing photo shoots, you know, when he was still doing the podcast with Lupe Fiasco in Chicago and doing photo shoots of like Take Ivy, but imagining like Take Ivy in Chicago, like with Black people and being like, this is not dissonance. This is reality as it can be, you know? Joshua
Kissy, who's now a director, but was a photographer who was like part of the street etiquette crew that did the first like Black Ivy with Ouija, Brooklyn Circus and all that. I mean, Virgil, I don't know what the extent of their relationship was at the highest, you know, level of Virgil's ascendance, but like they were close. And I mean, it was cool to see how it feels like because of where Virgil came from and what he experienced, like there was this sense of he was open to people from any different sort of level or notoriety or whatever. And, you know, he was running like the Kanye blog, you know, like the, I don't even remember what it was called, but like the college dropout stuff where it was like vibe check of just cool things. Like, you know, like he understood it the way that I feel like all the people who are really shaping fashion now kind of like grew up and understood.
And I think
I'm trying to just say it in the best way.
And I mean, like, that's the thing is that, like, I think that obviously we know within every industry, there's kind of like gatekeepers, right? And there's kind of people that are kind of like the kingmakers and the people that establish XYZ in terms of like how the world is. And whether you like his design or not, again, that's open to everybody. It's a subjective industry. That's fine. You know what I mean? Like everyone can have their own opinion on it. Like he was trying to redefine the landscape for all of us. And that's, I think, what was so crazy about what he was doing. And that's the hole, I think, that he leaves in the wake of his departure. And that question that like I've asked myself since that has been like, who will be the next leaders? And not to say that there aren't, but like, who will be the next leaders that have enough power in the way that he ultimately did to redefine the landscape and to kind of hold that that kind of power of change like he did.
Yeah, I mean, in a weird way, I think that the passing of him was also like a bit of a lightning rod in a good way for other folks to see like what he did. I mean, he basically, obviously he died and that was horrible to happen, but like, you know, he died as a legend, you know, and we're like and so everything that he, you know, like his legacy will obviously outlive any of the things that he did. Does that make sense? Like I'm really butchering my words there, but just you know, it's his death wasn't in vain. I guess I'll put it that way. I mean, you know, I know the fact that, you know, his a wife and kids and, you know, that's horrible, but like what he created and what he's kind of like paved the way on for others, I think is obviously huge. And I mean, that's just really special. But anyway, well, shit, this was huge. This was a great pod. We got to hang some time, man. I feel like
absolutely, we definitely got to get together.
Thank you so much for your time. Thank you, Caleb. It was great. It was great to chat with you. Thanks for tuning in. That's it for our show. Our theme music, as always, by the mysterious Breakmaster Cylinder. We're edited by Amar Lull. If you like what you heard, share the pod with a friend. Tell some folks about us. Leave a review on Apple Podcasts. If you're even doing that, you just go down and give it the little 5-star button. Follow us on Instagram for the hot content. If you want to talk to us and give us your hot take, we'd love to hear from you. So you can call us. Our phone number's in the show notes. Leave us a message. We'll put it in a future episode. Or email us at info@blamopod.com. If you want to hang with us and join the Blam fam, visit patreon.com/Blamo, where we have tons and tons of exclusive episodes in our amazing Slack community. All right, folks. See you next week.